Okay, so I'm gonna welcome Joey Rin. He's been part of the Steamboat Soccer program for a very long time. He started, I think, as an assistant club director and coached numerous teams within our club. And now he is currently one of our board members and also the age group director of our U11 boys. So welcome, Joey. Appreciate you taking time out of your day to chat with us.
Hi, thanks, Linda. Yeah, it's been a long time. My first foray was as an assistant volunteer coach for a U12 team for Dr. Bomberg here in town. He was the head coach. And I was just coming out of the co-ed league with him, and he asked me to coach his son's team with him. They were then called the Bombers. And it's funny because you see all those kids walking around town now, and they're like in their early 30s.
Well, so, what was the club like back then?
Man, it was so mix and match. It was funny. Rob was involved still, still, I should say. He was part of the very beginnings of the club. I came on probably 4 or 5 years after its inception, and thankfully been involved since. I remember vividly some of our board meetings and team forming. We would throw index cards on a table inside a boardroom in a bank and just pick the index cards, and that's how we would form our rec league teams. A lot of old timers were involved in the board back then, like Bob Milne, who has since come and gone. Chuck O'Connell was our board president way back. Travis Holmquist was involved, who from the club offices now. It's really come a long way. The birth of the club back then isn't a whole lot different than now, except that we've come a long way. The basic philosophies and fundamentals were there. We were really just trying to provide a sport that we loved for the kids so that they could play too. It was just antiquated when you look at it now.
Yeah. Were you guys traveling down to Denver and playing in the leagues down there, or did it just start here as a rec program?
Well, it started here locally, but by the time I got involved, we were already involved in what we called then the State League, which is now CSA. So we were already doing some traveling then. But we had a bigger rec division back then, just because it was in such its infancy that there was a reluctance for some families to want to jump on that travel train, and we just tried to do things here locally. So the competitive program was much smaller then. It was almost kind of reversed, where the heaviest numbers were in rec, all the way up through like U11, U12. We had co-ed mix and match teams that we would play. I want to say it was like every Wednesday. I mean, some familiar names that I saw come up through the club, like Ben Bell, Hobie Early, to name just a couple, our former board president, and of course now our technical director. They were kids back then in the club. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, so cool. So, okay, so let's go back to you and focus on you a little bit. So, do you want to share a little bit of where you grew up and how you got started within the game of soccer, and if you played club, college?
Absolutely, yep. I grew up in Rochester, New York. I'm a first-generation American. My parents emigrated over from La Paz, Bolivia, in South America. So soccer was really part of my family roots. My dad came over in 61, 62 to play at a small school outside of Buffalo, New York, called Erie Technical College. It was a small JC back then. He had a background playing in Bolivia. You could call it the national team back then, but we're talking about the 50s, right? So things were structured a lot different. He came over with a sense of just trying to get an education. And so when he came over, he played there. Subsequently went back to Bolivia, met my mom. They came back in 67. I was born in 68. They ended up settling in Rochester, New York, which is an hour away. And that's where I grew up. So soccer was part of the culture that I knew growing up. Got involved in some of my local club leagues growing up. And I had a little bit of an interesting situation where back then, and where I grew up, your club teams were basically formed geographically and in your neighborhood. So we had different franchises, if you will. We had Britannica Red and Britannica White and Red Star and Dynamo and Pinnacle. And these were all the names of our little club teams within our club itself. And so in my neighborhood, I started off with Britannica White, but everybody knew that Britannica Red was where you wanted to be, right? And you could say that when you look at how our club is now, I was on our white team. That was the purpose, right? Britannica White were the kids who were not quite as developed and maybe smaller in physical size, and we were all striving to get to Britannica Red. So my history started as what we know today as a white team player, and the very next year of organized soccer, and my dad was of course involved with the early years of my club playing. And by my second year, which would have been equivalent to U9, U10 here, I was promoted, if you will, to the Britannica Red. And so I played forward back in my younger, lighter, speedier days. And I played forward with another kid named Joey, who ironically lived in Steamboat for a little while and helped to start Black Tie Ski Rentals. May he rest in peace. He's no longer with us, unfortunately, but he went on to huge things. He went on to full ride at Notre Dame and indoor soccer league for the Indianapolis team. I did not. That being said, I played off and on, and that's maybe where the story goes, through my club and travel years into high school, and then even had a foray in a small well, it was a large school, but a small fledgling D1 soccer program in college. So it's been pretty much part of my life since I was born, mostly because it was so important to my dad. He sat on the board of directors for his club team in Bolivia, which is called Bolivar, for a number of years. And then when we settled in Rochester, he was kind of a player coach, if you will, and board member for the then national NASL league team, Rochester Lancers. Mm-hmm. So that was really cool because that provided me some experiences to get my club team to play at halftime. And those are the days with Pelé and Canalia and Shep Messing on the Cosmos. So we got to meet a lot of those guys in the NASL and get several opportunities to play at halftime of those games. So soccer's been in my life and around me as long as I can remember.
Yeah, and for, those kids in our club who are listening to this and may not really know the area of Rochester all that well, but when I was a college coach, I used to recruit a lot of kids from the Rochester area. It's such a hotbed for soccer. You can find some quality soccer players there. So, it had to be a fabulous place to grow up and be part of the game.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned your dad was involved. So you currently coach your son. Did your dad coach you then when you were younger?
Only in the introductory club levels, just to get involved. My dad's English was pretty good by then, but there was a little bit of a language barrier. And he was also a small business owner. So he wasn't around that much. He was, and still is actually, an optician. And he opened some eyeglass type stores when we were way younger and predominantly in some of the Spanish speaking neighborhoods of Rochester. That being said, he got involved early as kind of like your parent volunteer and helped out, but his availability was limited. And so it was only at the very start, but we did a lot of off the club or off the field work. I grew up right behind an elementary school, the one that I went to. And so if I wasn't practicing when he had time, we'd walk over to the school and he would coach me individually a lot more so than in the club coach fashion.
Yeah. Was he, because, everyone knows how passionate you are on the sideline, right? So do you feel like you got that from your father? Was he very similar when he would watch you play or coach you?
I think a little bit of it, but not outwardly with everyone. It was mostly with me. For better or for worse, it wasn't about the goal or two I scored. It was about the shot or two or three or five that I missed. And
That's so funny. My dad was the same way. We'd jump in a car and drive home, and like he would ignore the goals that I had, but pointed out every one I missed, and we had to talk about it, you know?
and if Nathan was sitting next to me right now, he's right down the hallway, he would unfortunately say similar. Part of what we're doing now with the U11 boys team, and specifically with the Navy group, is this program that you've introduced to us. What is the art of winning?
What drives winning?
What drives winning? Thank you. And part of some of our discussions is to, as you know, to connect with the human side of our players, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the hardships, everybody was discussing hardships, and what my son ended up saying was, one of the things he feels the most pressure about is being the coach's son,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that comes with a whole different set of requirements, doesn't it? So you have all these expectations. So my dad didn't necessarily do it to me on the field in game, but when we were, he was a great off the field coach, and I owe a lot of what I know today and how I came up through the sport to him. But man, was he harsh. It was harsh out of love, but geez Louise, I mean, can we talk about something good? So he was really, really hard on me. We talk about it now still. My dad's almost 83 years old, and we still talk about those days. And he remembers like certain plays, and you weren't deep enough on the far post against Pittsburgh Mendon in that game in '83. It's crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy. I think I was probably about 35 years old when I first heard my father say to somebody that I was a good player and the good things I did. Up until that point, it was like he pointed out everything that I did wrong. So
what means a lot to me right now with my dad is that he has also done the same as we've gotten later in life, and acknowledged that with all my trials and tribulations, which I'm sure we're going to get into, that I was a pretty good player. But he looks at me now. You've seen him, you've met him, you've seen him on the sidelines. He tells me that I am, and I take this to heart, that I am a way better coach than I ever was a player. And I got to be honest with you, that means way more to me now than ever.
Yeah, no, I agree. That's awesome. Okay, so yeah, let's dive in a little bit. So what is the biggest obstacle or challenge that you've overcome in your soccer career?
It would have to be, and I know we have this in common, it would have to be my history with injuries. At this point, at almost 52 years old, I've had 7 knee surgeries. And the first time I blew my ACL, I was about 12 or 13 years old. It was in 81, I think, maybe 82, 81, 82. And at that point in time, in 7th and 8th grade with my junior high team, we were the French Road Falcons. And I was supposed to be the next one, right? The second coming, this little kid with blazing speed and great ball control. And, I was the leading scorer on the 7th and 8th grade team in 7th grade. And then we get into the 8th grade season and everything's going well. And at that point in time, I was playing junior high and club travel. Couple of kids that I played with and against live in Steamboat still, which is just so funny coming from Rochester, New York. But and now our kids are friends, which is even better. But then that summer, playing a club game, ironically at my junior high, my middle school field, I was backpedaling. Believe it or not, I was playing center mid, which my son plays now, which was never and never should have been my natural position, but it was that day. And I was playing center mid, and I was backpedaling, and I planted my left foot, remember it vividly, to move right because the dude was making a move to my right. And I planted my foot in a little divot. Of course, fields back then, the quality, as you can probably recall, wasn't so great. And my whole body went, but my knee and lower leg didn't, and snap. There it was. And that was a game changer, literally, for that summer, for my impending high school career, and frankly, for my life involved with interscholastic sports. So that knee operation was performed by a gentleman named Kenneth DeHaven. His son David was a couple years younger than me, also ironically moved to Steamboat at some point. And the Strength and Fitness Center at Howelson Hill at at Winter Sports Club is named after him because he unfortunately passed in a ski-related accident here. But Kenneth DeHaven performed that knee surgery on me in the early 80s, and it was pioneer. So Good Morning America picked up that knee operation, paid for it, which came at a great time for the family because we couldn't really afford something like that, and televised it because at the time I was the youngest person to go through that type of ACL cadaver replacement surgery, and really changed the course of my life on that day in June of, I think, 1981.
You know, and I can't imagine mentally what a 12-year-old is thinking or going through, because I know when I tore my ACL, I had some, MCL stuff in my high school career, but in college, it was my senior year in college, I tore my ACL for the first time. So I know how I was mentally then. So I can't imagine at 12. I mean, do you want to share that a little bit? Do you remember how you were feeling at the time?
Yeah, I have some vivid memories of that because ironically, and my poor dad, who, as we just talked about, was a small business owner. And, my little sister was, I mean, basically it was where my kids are now, right? Nathan will be 11 on Sunday. Z will be 8 this summer. I was 12, 13. My little sister was like 9, 10. And my dad is this business owner. My mom was laid up with like a disc problem. I remember vividly me laid up with a knee brace and surgery on the sofa bed of my family room next to my mom, who's laid up with a back problem, and my dad and friends all trying to help. But in terms of the mentality part of it, I have to say that I was almost too young and too dumb to understand. And I don't mean dumb in that I wasn't aware of what was happening, but I barely tasted what could be. So I didn't necessarily know, outside of like what our own children are experiencing right now with this pandemic, not being able to be out there with my friends, not being able to do something that I love, not being on the field, getting the exercise, being outside. At that time, I wasn't thinking, oh my gosh, what does this mean for varsity in high school? Am I ever going to play college? I couldn't wrap my brain around it. It was more about what was happening now, what I couldn't do now. Oh my gosh, what about this season, right? So looking back on it, I'm much more able to see what it meant then than when I was in that time period of what it meant at that time.
Yeah, and so and I'm just trying to think at 12, even reflecting back on when I was 12, like the whole goal setting, right? Like you had these goals that you wanted to achieve, or, maybe it was like, score, 15 goals in that season, or whatever your goals were at that time. Now here you are, going through a major surgery and being laid up on the sofa, and you had to go through this whole new goal setting, right? Did you have to set new goals and that were more realistic of what you were currently going through?
Well, again, it wasn't really, I knew that I was getting ready to go into high school. And I knew that if I was my seventh grade self, that I had a shot at, getting maybe a bench position on the varsity team, which is one of those ironies that you and I have had this conversation about younger kids who, get to make the varsity squad but ride the pine as opposed to getting all those minutes in JV. So, I was thinking about a little bit about what it meant for, oh my gosh, well, this is in August, we're supposed to start trying out for the high school team. And what does that mean? And what about all my friends that were going to do it? And we were about to merge with the other middle school too, right? So there's French Road and 12 Corners. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I know that I'm one of the best kids here, and I play club with and against some of these kids from 12 Corners. What does it mean for the big picture? So my mindset was really, I mean, I'm 12, 13 years old and I'm in physical therapy. And when
Mm.
you look around physical therapy, it's, to me, it's all old people, which
Yeah.
are like 30s, 40s, 50s. There's nobody in there that's my age. There's nobody recovering, and at that age, you're breaking your collarbone and your wrist and doing stupid stuff like that. You're not blowing your knee and having a long road. I mean, back then you were looking at almost a year of recovery.
Yeah, totally. So seven knee surgeries. So at any point were you like, why me? Why does this always happen to me?
You know, it was my junior year in high school. So I battled back. And here's a little bit of an irony too. You were kind enough to send me some questions in advance. And one of the questions was, did I feel disconnected from my teammates?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to that one is absolutely yes. The funny thing is that I had a good relationship with some of my French road teammates. I didn't really know a lot of those 12 Corners kids outside of um, playing with them, you know, a little bit of club soccer. My friends were the football players. I don't know how it all happened, but I really hung out with the football players. Some of the players were my buddies, but I didn't have the same types of relationships with them I did. So where this story is going is that once I lost all that time and wasn't able to play soccer, I didn't go through the freshman tryouts. I wasn't really a part of the program, but I was involved in wrestling at a very early age. I started in second grade, and the guy, my coach, that discovered me then in just rolling around in a wrestling practice in second grade, ended up being my high school coach and is the one coach from my high school days that I still remain in contact with now. He was the freshman football coach. And so he asked me to keep me involved in something because he was that coach in my life. I was the team manager for the freshman football team. So I was on the sidelines with the coaches. And that's when the light bulb started going off of being involved, holding the clipboard. My job was to record all of the defensive plays, all the tackles, the assists, the interceptions, fumble recoveries, sacks, all that kind of stuff. And so I was involved in something from an administrative and coaching type of point of view where I was involved. And the cool thing is that most of my buddies who played freshman football, you know, sometimes the team manager, the water boy, they kind of catch flack. They accepted me as part of the team. And so I was part of something. And that was really cool. And I think, again, when you look back on that now, and where you see where I am now with the club and some other community involvement, that played a huge role. That coach, Coach Mark Hoyt, played a huge role in how I started to become interested in different things and became a student of certain different games. I did subsequently then, soccer was my love, right? My dad played. I need to get back to it. So sophomore year, I went through the tryouts. I made the JV team. In the middle of the year, I got called up as a bench player for the playoff drive. I had a decent season. You know, I was getting some time. I was getting some minutes. I wasn't the guy, and I was okay with that. I was one of the guys, and I was starting to develop these relationships. My coach, Dennis Mepham, was a real hard ass. Wasn't very fun to play with. It was all business, and he was rigid. I see him in my mind right now. He was that 6'3" coach. He was kind of skinny. He had the furrowed brow and the crew cut. He was just old school 80s, you know, no fun. We're here to play. His son played for the then, it wasn't the North American Soccer League anymore. I think it was the ASL, the American Soccer League, which was Division II, and it was the Rochester Flash. And so his son Dennis came up through our program and played with the Rochester Flash. And so I was involved. And then circling back to the why me, well, here we are. It's next year. It's going into junior year. We're in preseason practice. I've already made the squad. I'm on varsity. Bam, blow the knee again. One thing we didn't talk about was during that stint of being freshman football manager, I was a kid. I didn't let my knee recover enough, and I re-injured it playing backyard football in my own yard. And so it ended up being almost 18 months until I could get back to that sophomore tryout for soccer. But again, here I am, junior year. We're a week away from the opening game. We're practicing on the high school field. Boom, there it goes again. That's when I was old enough to say, why me? I can't believe this, you know?
Yeah.
I missed that whole year. Soccer, wrestling. I made it back for the middle of my baseball season that year. But again, more lost time in high school sports.
Yeah, which is a nightmare. I mean, I can't and I totally know where you're coming from. When it's something that you love, you know, just you have that passion to just being outside and being on some type of field, playing some type of sport, and any minute that you can't do that is just a complete nightmare.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 16, 17 years old, and I'm three knee injuries into it already. I
Yeah.
mean, my doctor at that point was telling my parents, "You got to pull him. He's got to be done. His life is going to be miserable at 40. You know, it just isn't feasible." But then again, there was this coach. There was Mark Hoyt, my wrestling coach. You know,
Mhm.
and he just kept me involved. He was just on me, and he it was just something that he knew that none of us didn't, about me, that he was nurturing and bringing out. And I mean, I can so boldly say, I mean, look at me now. And you know, between my youth club coach Gary Levine, who ironically became the high school coach after I left, and Coach Mark Hoyt, my wrestling coach for life, they're the ones, aside from my dad, who really shaped and influenced the direction that I took.
And I'm just going to take a brief moment on that statement because, you know, I'm doing a lot of these podcasts more so to inspire our players than our coaches. But what an amazing statement right there, because you don't really realize how much of an impact us coaches do make on these players, and those players who are injured or just feel like they're disconnected are really the ones that we need to like reach out and stay, even more connected with, right? Because
No kid left behind. That's
yeah.
what we say. You and I say it all the time. No kid left behind. I've got, like you, I've got a number of club stories here from Steamboat of kids that were the roly-poly outside substitute defender that went on to be the senior team captain or played club in college. And, even a few of those kids have cycled back and are now coaching in this club. So I owe a lot, obviously, to my dad, to Mark Hoyt, to Gary Levine, but especially Coach Hoyt, CH, as we called him, and it kind of instilled this sideline mentality, that foray into, I can't even emphasize enough, that foray of all things into being the freshman football team manager. I
Yeah.
even got to kick a bunch of field goals, right? And it was just fun.
Yeah. So with all of these setbacks and injuries, you were still able to go on and be part of a Division I college program. So how did you make that happen?
That's really interesting. So I had a decent senior year. The club had a decent senior year. I was able to make it back. I cracked the starting lineup on several occasions. I couldn't admittedly say that I was part of the starting 11 anywhere, but with an injury or grades or a school suspension, I found myself at that outside right side midfield or right wing position on several occasions. And I had a decent senior year. I scored like 12 goals. I want to say I had something like 14, 16 assists. I was definitely involved. Our team made it deep into sectionals. We got beat by Pittsford Sutherland, Kip and Scott Tyrone, who both live here in town. Arthur Tyrone is on Doug Klingeman's team. Nathan and Arthur are Nordic combined teammates. So it's funny how this all works, but they're the ones that beat us. They were generally better. It's also the school that this Joey Sternberg played for that I told you we played Joey and Joey up top. So I had a decent senior year. And when I started looking at colleges, I was really looking more towards wrestling than I was soccer, just because my experience, my comfort level with wrestling, the mano a mano that I experienced and everything that CH had done for me. But I also, when you grow up in Rochester, it's like a rites of passage to apply to Syracuse, to Ithaca, to SUNY Buffalo, to Albany, right? Like everybody does it. And I was just coming out of my shell. I mean, I was a mama's boy, admittedly, and I was coming through all these injuries and didn't really develop socially till later, While the other kids were dorking out, drinking canned beer behind the bowling alley, I was going to movies with my parents. You know what I mean? I was doing homework on weekends. I was cutting the lawn. So I had developed some good relationships, but I wasn't out there hanging out with the cool kids, if that's what you want to call it. So they were definitely my friends, but when it came, I was a mama's boy. And so when it came to looking for school, I was looking for something that I could do by myself, on my own, go somewhere where not Syracuse, where 26 kids from my graduating class went, right? So I found this school, Northeastern University in Boston, Massachusetts, and they were a fledgling D1 program. The coach was Antonio Vargas, AV, Coach V, Vargi. He was from Chile. And I met with him. I met with the club wrestling coach, excuse me. It was an urban school. It was in the middle of Boston, subways, transit. You know, it was just nothing this mama's boy had ever seen before. And there was just something about it. I went on my visit by myself without my parents. There was a girl a year older than me, Robin Levine, whose younger brother Todd was a wrestling teammate of mine, a couple years younger, who went to the school. There was a kid 2 years older than me named John DeLaura from my high school, who also went there. And it was like, maybe this is it. It's 60,000 something kids, you know, 25,000 of which were commuter kids from the Boston area. At the time, it was the largest private university in the United States. And I just thought, man, you know, little fish, big pond, I'm on my own, I can make my own decisions. And so I decided to go there, understanding that I would get a look while playing club. So I did club wrestling and club soccer my first year. And I didn't need parent permission. I didn't need doctor permission. So this was all against the advice of my parents and my doctors because of my current knee situation.
Yeah. So you started off playing club and then you eventually made the varsity team.
I did. So it was in the middle of my first year, and again with a couple injuries on the varsity team. And because of, I still was fast enough even after a few surgeries, you know, they needed an outside midi. And so I got the call up and rode the bench, I want to say 3-4 games, but I got to wear the shirt. I got to wear the jersey, right? And I was involved, yeah. Right? And I come through a history of not being the guy. So I was already comfortable not being the guy. But being part of it was cool. And Northeastern was known for its international student population. I mean, we had kids from Europe, from South America, from Mexico. So just these friends and these kids that I was meeting at the time was well worth it. But then comes the day where we're playing MIT, at MIT, and there's probably 20 minutes left in the game. We're up 3-1, and Vargi looks down the bench and says, "Joey, you're in." It was one of those like Adam Sandler Waterboy moments. I looked at him, you know, like, did he just say my name? And I can't tell you how fast that warm up came off and how I check down the field and I take my position. And you're not going to believe it, but you're going to believe it with the tone of this discussion. I'm on the field 3 minutes and I'm challenging for a ball on the right side against your stereotypical 6'2", 180-pound D1 defender, right? We both go for the 50-50 at the same time. We both kick the ball at the same time. Shattered my right foot. I'm on the field 3 minutes, crawling to the sideline. Trainer comes over. They take me to the bench. 3 broken bones, metatarsals in the foot, in a walking boot.
Nightmare. Oh my God.
So it was just one of those things, right? Sat out the rest of the season. The cool thing was, as you know, getting involved in a D1 in a serious college program, or we were fledgling, we weren't very good. You know, I think you and I talked about this. You know, UConn was a major power at the time. They were beating us 6-0 at halftime. I remember going up to Maine. They were a power at the time. They had us 5-1 at halftime. The keeper comes out and plays striker. Like, we were that team. We were the other Boston school, right? We weren't BU. We weren't BC by any stretch. But the cool thing is you got this training staff. So they're taking care of me and I'm healing and I'm doing great. And to kind of cut to the chase, I come back and I play my full second year, my sophomore year. And then at Northeastern, it's a 5-year co-op school. So your third year is called middler year. You go freshman, sophomore, middler, junior, senior. In the middle of my middler year, I'm playing, we're having a good time. A new coach comes in, Keith Camage. He's a British guy. not Vargy, who was a player's coach. You know, he was like 27 years old at the time, right?
Mhm.
This stern British guy, this power game up the middle, big size, physicality comes in and changes everything we do. And I kind of start looking around and I'm like, well, I'm not going to be on the national team. You know, I'm not going to, this is it for me, right? And so I stepped away in the middle of the season. I left the team. It's the one and only time I've ever quit a sport or anything practically, except for a job that wasn't very good. Um, and I walked away. You know, it was just, I didn't have the fever. It wasn't in the heart anymore. You
Yeah.
know, I was in college. I wanted to meet girls. I wanted to be in student government. I wanted to try all these things available to me in the city of Boston. And the love of the game, the passion that we spoke of before, it was gone. I wasn't having fun. I didn't like being there. Back then, AstroTurf was a piece of carpet rolled out on concrete. You know, my knees were hurting. It just wasn't enough to keep me around anymore. There was no more fire burning. So I walked away.
Do you have any regrets now of that or no?
No, no, absolutely not. Because that sophomore year, we were playing number 6 ranked Boston College at their place. It was the first year of their new field. They were all high and mighty. It was just one of those games where I could do no wrong.
Mhm.
Every pass I made was crisp. It was received. I was in the right place at the right time. And so in overtime, we ended up getting a goal to tie it 1-1 in regulation with a few minutes left. Vargy sends the 11 of us back out there, gives us this rah-rah talk, you know, this Friday Night Lights type thing, you know, and it was just it was a great moment. We get a corner kick. There's probably a few minutes left in golden goal. And very typical of my career and who I was, the corner kick comes over. My dad's voice is in my head about playing the back post. Hold your ground, hold your ground. It's, you know, there's 5 or 6 bodies in there. We all kind of go in. Next thing I know, I feel something hit my thigh. It's in the net. The place is silent, right? When you're the visiting team, they're number 6 in the country. This wasn't a fancy volley. This wasn't a shot from 30 yards. This was like a collision. And then, you know, I remember it vividly. I'm looking at it right now, inside of my right thigh. I don't know if it hit anybody else or how, but what I do know is it hit me. It went in. We win. We're the story of the Boston papers that next day or two. Regrets? No. At the time, it was cool because I was making new friends. I helped start a fraternity. I was involved in student government. I was on what you could call like a debate team, if you can imagine, right? So I was just now experiencing all these things in school that was offered to me that wasn't so sport centric.
Mhm. So, you know, I love all these stories about your resilience and continuing to stay focused and move through it. So, you know, we always have kids that have injuries, and any advice you can give to these kids to keep them positive and moving forward.
Absolutely, because you just said the word itself. I was going to bring it up, and I'm glad that you brought it up before me, but resilience, right?
Mhm.
Um, all these little things, it's like cooking, you know, cooking is a big thing in our household. And um, every little ingredient, you know, a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of spice, a little bit of this, that's what continues to make you who you are. And every little thing that happens along the way, blowing your knee at 12 or 13, fighting your way back to have it happen again, your first glorious minute on the varsity field in college and you break your foot. You know what I'm saying? Just all these little teeny things that lead up to it. And I gotta say, if it wasn't for all of that, I am making way more of an impact on children, with children, and in the sport of soccer now, as a coach, as a member of the Steamboat Soccer Club and Steamboat Springs Youth Soccer Association, because of all those things and who I became now, than I ever would have been if I would have been the guy, in my opinion. And my good friend Tony Counts and I, we talk about this all the time, right? Because his story is interesting too, where, you know, he was a football player. He got involved late. And all of a sudden, his athletic ability got him to this certain level of semi-pro. But he and I, we talk about it all the time. We love the game and we love the kids and the impact that we can make now, with everything that we went through and what we could become. My advice would be never let it get you down. Keep fighting, because for every fork in the road, the path gets brighter and brighter. And frankly, the joy that I have right now, you've seen it, sometimes a little bit louder than it should be. The joy that I get right now, not only being a club coach for all these kids that I've helped shape and mold, some of whom I'm still in contact with to this day, and now being able to coach my own children, and that joy on the sideline, that ability to live vicariously. The joy I feel now, Coach, is so much more. I mean, borderline that Boston College goal, but so much more than anything I felt on the path to get here.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so I want to end on a positive note with you. Okay, tell me the best goal you've ever scored.
That was it.
That was it. Okay.
That goal. I mean, thankfully for me, there was several, and some of those youth goals and when you're with your buddies and all that meant something. But you know, that was almost the culmination of my playing career, because that was towards the end of my sophomore year. And as I told you just a second ago, I walked away. I never had the same fever, but the joy, the notoriety, the everything that came out of that one goal, that made everything that I went through before that, playing, the struggles, the not being the guy, you know, always fighting to get that crack at the starting lineup. But that goal against Boston College culminated everything. Again, my heart wasn't in it in the beginning of that third year. And so that's why I walked away. That was, you know, by far the biggest goal that I ever scored in my life. I don't know if it was the best. I remember one in 7th grade with the French Road Falcons. That was really, really cool. Just the way it shot, the way it felt, how it was, you know, that's one of those memories that's ingrained. But the biggest goal ever was definitely that Boston College goal.
You know, so I just loved how you grinned right then when I could see you were thinking about that goal you scored in 7th grade, because, and I think that just made me so happy seeing you grin when you were thinking about a goal, because I think one of the best feelings in the world is putting the ball in the back of the net.
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. It's such an amazing feeling. And when you took that moment, I could see you thinking, and that smile, like, that's how it feels. Like, it's such a fabulous feeling.
Oh, just the angle. It was the angle. It was, you know, it was so lucky. It was, you know, the way it bounced, how I hit it, you know, the vision of the goalkeeper reaching for it, hitting the side netting. You know, I was right wing, hitting that side netting on the other side. You know, I remember my teammate and good buddy still to this day, Andy Braverman. You know, he was running towards me. It was just, yeah, there was a lot of really cool stuff that happened at those ages. But you know, here we are now, huh, Coach?
Yeah. Did you have a nickname that you went by?
You know, nothing that ever stuck. In the really younger days, I was Speedy Gonzalez because my parents were Spanish and I was really fast, and that was a popular cartoon then. But no, I never really had a nickname that stuck, because Joey was my nickname. You know, I was always Joey.
Yeah. Nice.
And I still am Joey.
Awesome, Joey. Well, you know, I think we're very fortunate. The club is very fortunate that they've had you be part of their program for so long. And I'm so excited that we still have you involved, and with your son and daughter's team. That just means that you can't go anywhere. We've got you. And, you know, I look forward to watching your kids play and watching them progress, and even watch and work with you and see how, you know, because I always feel like I reflect back on when I was a young coach and how I am now. And, you know, it's interesting to watch ourselves grow and mold into different, you know, different people, different coaches, you know.
Yeah, you know, I look forward to it too. I joke with you and everybody else. I'm in it till you guys ask me to leave. You know, it's been so long now. I'm going on 30 years. Like I said, I've seen some of our own coaches, Hobie in particular. I was never fortunate to be Hobie's direct coach, but I remember coaching at Emerald on a field with my group, which was next to Hobie's group, where he was coaching. He had a different club coach at the time, but this is it. This is where I derive my passion. This is where I can be at my happy place, and even more so now with my own children. But you guys are going to have to ask me to leave.
Yeah, and so happy place. Like, what are you doing with your time right now with all this madness going on with the COVID, and you can't get to your happy place?
Well, I am getting a little bit to the happy place. Yesterday, right after the board meeting that you and I were in together, I had my weekly Zoom meeting with my group, and we did the scavenger hunt, which I have to say went over brilliantly.
Awesome.
It was fun, the connections that we had, and then my kids and I are getting out on the field a couple times a week. We're bending the rules a little bit, but we're getting out, we're kicking it around, we're still so we have a net in the side yard over here. So we're still getting there. Now it's not quite where I want to be. I'd like to be in the platinum division with the U11 Navy boys. I'd like to be out there with the U9, U10 girls, and I'd like to be doing what we were supposed to be doing. But we're working hard with the U11 group virtually. We're doing some stuff through the programs that we've discussed with you. I'm sorry, I'm going to say it wrong again. Not the art of winning, but
What drives winning?
thank you. What drives winning? And then again, we're getting out on the field a couple days a week. We're shooting at the side, so we're still touching the ball. We're still getting out there, and we're waiting patiently for this to lift.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm missing
Yeah.
it. I miss the smell of the grass. I miss laughing with all the kids, and I can't wait either. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thanks, Joy. I really appreciate you taking time out and sharing your story with us. And I hope
Thanks.
our
My
kids,
pleasure. It was awesome. I wish we could do it for hours. I would sit here with you and talk about this for hours.
well, we might have to have a part two.
We could do that.
All right. Well, enjoy yourself. Have a great day and weekend,
Thank you.
and we'll chat soon.
All right. Bye, Linda.
See ya.